Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi man wala. The next part in this volume is a chapter of Al-Masajid, talking about the places of worship for the Muslims. Al-Masajid, the place of sujood. Basically, this is what it means. Masjid means the place of sujood, place of salah and worship, prayer. The Masajid, the virtue of the Masajid in general can be understood from the hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ says, أحب البلاد إلى الله مساجدها وأبغض البلاد إلى الله أسواقها. The most beloved locations on earth to Allah, or in the sight of Allah, are the Masajid. So this alone is something that's very virtuous for the person to try to be keen to come to the place of worship of Allah, because Allah loves this place, and of course loves for His servants to be to stay in this place or come to this place, visit it, stay in it if their time allows for that. As you know, also in the Quran, Allah, in Surah An-Nur, after Allah talked about His guidance and light, immediately after that, the ayah, Allah nuru as-samawati wal-ard mathalu nurihi, at the end of the verse, after this verse, the following verse, Allah said, في بيوت أذن الله أن ترفع ويذكر فيها اسمه, which means that the best location, best place and source of this light on earth is the masjid. If you want this light that Allah talked about in the previous verse, this is where you have to come. You have to come to the masjid. أذن الله أن ترفع means honored. ويذكر فيها اسمه, and the mentioning of Allah is, or the name of Allah is mentioned in these places. So these are the places of where you attain the love of Allah. This is the place where you attain the guidance and light and direction from Allah Azza wa Jal. Okay, that alone is a big virtue for the Masajid. It's virtuous to build and participate in building a masjid. A hadith indicates that whoever builds or participates in building a masjid for Allah, Allah will build a residence for him in Jannah. In some of the hadith, it says, وَلَوْ كَمِفْحَصِ قَطَى, even if his share in the masjid was as big as a nest of a bird, a small bird, qata, even if he only shared very little, that his share is like maybe this big in the masjid, Allah will build a whole residence for him in Jannah. And of course, you know the value of even موضع صوت أحدكم, like we mentioned today in the khutbah. Even just موضع صوت أحدكم في الجنة is something unimaginable, so you can imagine what a residence in Jannah would be. Now, also the three most virtuous and honored masajid, places of worship for the Muslims on earth, are in order: the Masjid al-Haram, Mecca, Masjid al-Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Masjid al-Nabawi, and then al-Masjid al-Aqsa. And those are the only three masajid that if somebody were to travel, go on a big trip to go to a masjid, these are the three. Otherwise, you're only supposed to go to your local masjid. Now, صلاة في مسجدي هذا خير صلاة في مسجد هذا خير من ألف صلاة فيما سواه إلا مسجد الحرام. So one prayer in the Masjid al-Nabawi is better than 1,000 prayer in any other masjid, except the Masjid al-Haram, بمئة ألف صلاة, right? بمئة ألف, نعم? Correct me if I'm wrong. The Masjid al-Haram, while on the other hand, Masjid al-Haram is 100,000, if I'm not mistaken. Also, Masjid Quba has a virtue as well. Prophet ﷺ used to visit the Masjid of Quba every Saturday. Quba. No.
Besides Medina, right?
No, Quba, sorry. No.
The entrance of Medina.
Exactly. Quba, Masjid Quba. Every Saturday he used to go either walking or he would take a ride, like a camel, or and he used to sometimes pray ركعتين. He used to go and pray ركعتين. لأن أصلي في مسجد قباء ركعتين. سعد بن أبي وقاص says that, صحابي, أحب إلي من أن آتي بيت المقدس مرتين. It is more beloved to me to pray there 2 rak'at than to go to Bayt al-Maqdis in Palestine. That's the third masjid. There's more to the Masjid Quba than this. Let me see here. Masjid Quba. مساجد الثلاث. نعم, مسجد قباء. وصلاة في المسجد الحرام أفضل من 100,000 صلاة. نعم فيما سواه. المسجد الحرام 100,000 صلاة. Not only the salah but every act of worship, even the dhikr, every deed is multiplied 100,000 times in the Masjid al-Haram, while every deed in the Masjid al-Nabawi is multiplied 1,000 times. Now, صلاة في مسجد قباء كعمرة. There's a hadith on this matter. Imam al-Albani considered it authentic, that if you do a prayer in Masjid Quba, it's like you've done a Umrah. Also, Masjid al-Aqsa, there's a da'wah, there's a supplication made by Sulaiman ibn Dawood. It's mentioned in the hadith. Prophet ﷺ is narrating, telling this dua that Sulaiman ibn Dawood did. And there's 3 da'awat. One of them, he said that whoever comes to this masjid and pray in Palestine, إِلَّا خَرَجَ مِنْ ذُنُوبِهِ كَيَوْمِ وَلَدَتْهُ أُمُّهُ, that he is asking Allah to forgive all of his sins, and he goes out of that masjid as if he was just born. Prophet ﷺ said about that, أَمَّا اثْنَتَانِ فَقَدْ أُعْطِيَهُمَا. The first 2 da'awat, the first 2 invocations, he was granted. He says, and I hope he will also be granted this 3rd one, which is that the forgiveness of the sins if somebody prays in Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. This is the virtue of the 3 masajid. Now, also Masjid Nabawi, there's another place in Masjid Nabawi that's even more virtuous, which is بين بيتي ومنبري ما بين بيتي ومنبري روضة من رياض الجنة. نعم. Which means either that people who deliberately try to stay there will be admitted to the gardens of Jannah. Rawda means garden of Jannah, one of the gardens of Jannah. Or that you feel the peace and tranquility and blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if you are staying in a garden of the gardens of Jannah while you are in this small spot in the Masjid al-Haram, in Masjid Nabawi. Also, now this comes very important point here, استحباب كثرة الخطى إلى المساجد وانتظار الصلاة فيها. It is very virtuous to go a long distance to come to the masjid. The hadith says that the one who has the highest reward in the salah is the one that who comes to the masjid from the furthest away location. He had to travel the longest distance to come to the masjid. He gets the highest reward in the salah. Now, and then this is the same hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ says, وَالَّذِي يُصَلِّيهَا مَعَ الْإِمَامِ أَعْظَمُ أَجْرًا مِنَ الَّذِي يُصَلِّيهَا ثُمَّ يَنَامُ. And the one who waits for the imam to lead the salah, come for salat al-jama'ah, is better. He gets more reward than the one who prays, meaning at home before the jama'ah, of course, and then goes to bed. Now, we mentioned this hadith is one of the evidences that it's not obligatory to come for salat al-jama'ah, but it's very virtuous. As you can see, we've been talking for nights about the virtue of coming for jama'ah, the steps, every step that you take, waiting for the salah will come. Now, one of the Sahaba, Ubay ibn Ka'b, talks about him. He says there was one of the Sahaba, there was nobody further away from the masjid than him. But he was usually the first one in the masjid. He was very dedicated. So he says here, لا تخطئه صلاة. Never would he miss a salah, subhanAllah, although he was very far away. So, فقيل له, people said to him, أو قلت له, or maybe he says, either I said or somebody said to him, why don't you buy, and he used to walk, why don't you buy you a donkey or something, some kind of ride, especially at night, and also when it's hot, because he used to come even for Zuhr. He says, no, I really don't, I wouldn't wish for my house to be close to the masjid. ما يسرني أن منزلي إلى جنب المسجد. I wouldn't want that. I don't want to be close to the masjid. He says, إني أريد أن يكتب لي ممشي إلى المسجد ورجوعي إذا رجعت إلى أهلي. He says, I want Allah to count those steps for me going and coming back. Prophet ﷺ, when he heard that, says, قَدْ جَمَعَ اللَّهُ لَكَ ذَلِكَ كُلَّهُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted you both. Now, normally we get reward for going to the masjid. Okay, that's the reward in the hadith. But here, this man had such a strong intention that he says, I'm hoping that Allah will count even my steps back home. And this is exactly what he got. He says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has gave you both. Like he got the bonus going back home as well. Now, also one time Banu Salama, it's a small clan in Medina called Banu Salama. They one time the area around Medina became vacant. So they felt that they can hold, the whole clan or the small tribe can come and live close to the masjid. They're very dedicated. They wanted to come to the masjid, not miss the salah. Prophet ﷺ heard that. He said, and then he went to them and talked to them. He said, I heard that you want to come closer to the masjid. We've been going for 10 minutes. Inshallah, we'll finish at 15. They said, yes, well, that's our plan. He said to them, قال يا بني سلمة دياركم تكتب آثاركم دياركم تكتب آثاركم. دياركم means إلزموا دياركم. He says, stay put, stay where you are. تكتب آثاركم. Your athar, your footsteps are being counted. إن نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم. All these traces that you leave behind, even in the Quran, فما بكت عليهم السماء والأرض وما كانوا منظرين. Even every place that you prayed in, and every place you did a good deed in, would be mourning the person. It would mourn that person when he dies. While the kuffar, Allah said about them, عن آل فرعون فما بكت عليهم السماء والأرض. Says they didn't do anything good, so nothing on earth mourned them or cried for them. Bakat means cried. So the earth didn't cry, and no good deeds went up to the heaven because they were kuffar, right? All the good deeds are they get fed by it in dunya, and Allah will give them in dunya, provide for them in dunya. So the heavens, nothing has actually passed the heavens. So the heaven didn't cry for them, and the يومئذ تحدث أخبارها. All these are evidences and witnesses. When you make the adhan, everything will witness for you. Everything that hears your voice will witness for you. Even this wood here, okay, will be a witness for you. Also, and as you know, من تطهر في بيتي, if you make wudu in your house and you come to the masjid, every step that you take, كانت خطوته إحداهما تحط خطيئة والأخرى ترفع درجة. Each step would wipe and expiate a sin, another one would elevate you in the sight of Allah Azza wa Jal, one rank. Now, Allah would build a place for you in Jannah for every time you go to the masjid. That's another thing that's mentioned here in the ahadith. Oh, in this next hadith, in الملائكة تصلي على أحدكم. Tusalli means they make dua for the person who stays after the salah in the masjid to make dhikr and dua. ما لم يحدث, as long as he has kept his wudu. They say Allahumma ghfir lahu, Allahumma arhamhu. Oh Allah, forgive him. Oh Allah, have mercy on him. Now, and then he says, لا يزال, look at this, لا يزال أحدكم في صلاة ما دامت الصلاة تحبسه لا يمنعه أن ينقلب إلى أهله إلا الصلاة. He says, as long as you are waiting for the salah, Allah is counting for you as if you are constantly praying. As long as this is what's holding you, is waiting for the salah. Okay? 12 minutes. Here, dua khuruj al-masjid. When you go out to the masjid, let me read this hadith for you first. Very inspiring hadith. Ibn Abbas says that he one time slept at the house of the Prophet ﷺ. Prophet ﷺ woke up. He made his siwak, cleansed his teeth, brushed his teeth. Then he made the wudu. Then he recited the verses in آخر سورة Al-Imran. Al-Imran, إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب. Verily, in the creation of the heavens and earth and in the succession of the day and night, there are signs for the people of thought or people who think. فقرأ هؤلاء الآيات حتى ختم السورة. He read from there till the end of the surah, which is about 2 pages. Then he got up and he prayed 2 rak'at. فأطال فيهما القيام والركوع والسجود, and they were very long 2 rak'at. Then he prayed only these 2 rak'at, but they were long. It could have been maybe an hour or longer. And then he went to bed and he slept حتى نفخ, which means he heard his breathing heavy. He heard him breathing heavy. He says then he got up again and he did the same sequence. He would get up, do the siwak, do the wudu, recite those same ayat, these 2 pages, then do 2 long rak'at. So he did this 3 times in that same night. That's 6 rak'at. Then he did 3 rak'at of witr. That was by that time it was Fajr time. Then he went out for the salah, and this is his dua. That is, we have to try to remember, inshallah, to say when Allah guide us to come to Fajr. اللهم اجعل في قلبي نورا وفي لساني اللهم اجعل في قلبي نورا وفي لساني نورا واجعل في سمعي نورا واجعل في بصري نورا واجعل في خلفي نورا behind me ومن أمامي نورا واجعل من فوقي نورا above me ومن تحتي نورا and beneath me. اللهم أعطني نورا. Oh Allah, give me light. Okay? Now, And in some of the narrations, وَأَعْظِمْ لِي نُورًا, أَعْظِمْ لِي نُورًا, which means magnify or increase my light. وَجَعَلْنِي نُورًا, and make me light as well. So you can combine all this. وَجَعَلْ لِي نُورًا, وَجَعَلْنِي نُورًا, وَأَعْظِمْ لِي نُورًا. You can say that, okay? Also, you go out and you say, the first thing that you say when you leave the house, Bismillah tawakkaltu ala Allah, in the name of Allah, I rely on Allah, and there's no power or change except by the will of Allah. وَلَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. Okay? And then when you'd say that, the malaika would say to him, Hudita wa kufita wa uqit. You have been guided, you have been protected, you have been made sufficient, or something like that. Wa kufita. Also another dua when you leave the house, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika an adilla aw udal. Oh Allah, I seek refuge in you from going astray, from leading someone astray or from going astray, being misled or misleading someone. Aw azilla aw uzal. Zalal means to fall into a mistake. Okay, zalal comes from the slip of the foot. So he says, I seek refuge in you from falling into a mistake or making someone fall into a mistake. Aw adlima udlam, or from being unjust to someone, or from somebody being unjust to me. Aw ajhal aw yujhal alay, or from being rude. Jahl here doesn't mean being ignorant. It means abusing somebody verbally, or being abused verbally. Naam. Also, when you enter the masjid, you say, Allahumma aftah li abwaba rahmatik. And when you leave, you say, Allahumma nas'aluka min fadlik. There's other narrations that say, Allahumma salli ala Nabi Muhammad wa aftah li abwaba rahmatik. Naam. Let me read you the other narration. If you go in with your right foot, you say, Rabbi ighfir li dhunubi. Naam. Oh Allah, forgive my sins. وافتح لي أبواب رحمتك. وإذا خرج صلى على النبي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم رب اغفر لي ذنوبي وافتح لي أبواب فضلك. So when you go in, you say three things. اللهم صل على النبي محمد. Okay, إذا خرج صلى على محمد وسلم. That's he used to say that about his own self. When he goes in, صلاة على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. Then رب اغفر لي ذنوبي, oh Allah, forgive my sins. وافتح لي أبواب رحمتك, and open the doors of your mercy. When you leave, اللهم صل على النبي محمد. خرج صلى الله على محمد وسلم. Not only صلى, اللهم صل وسلم على النبي محمد. رب اغفر لي ذنوبي, Allah, forgive my sins. وافتح لي أبواب فضلك, and open the gates of your favors. Al-Fadl is something on top of the mercy, something beyond the mercy. Okay, this is the meaning of Fadl. Okay, also أعوذ بالله العظيم وبوجهه الكريم وسلطانه القديم من الشيطان الرجيم. I seek refuge in Allah, the glorious Allah, وبوجهه الكريم, and his generous face, وسلطانه القديم, and his power or dominion. Sultan means dominion, the everlasting dominion. من الشيطان الرجيم, from the accursed Satan. Now, this is what you say when you enter the masjid. Then you do tahiyyat al-masjid before you sit down. Now, we'll stop here, inshallah. Now,
Is that only when going out for praying, or is it like going out
no,
every time?
this is the first dua that you say. Bismillah tawakkaltu ala Allah. In the name of Allah, I rely on Allah, and there's no power or change except by the will of Allah. That you say whenever you leave the house for any reason. Now, stop here.